Welcome to Karaoke Live. Tonight is episode 2 of our suicide prevention show. I'm sorry I'm starting so late. We had a lot of issues with the stream and the encoder, but we've got it going now. It's just transition from Facebook to YouTube. So, welcome to our show, episode number 45. Tonight's show is part 2 of our suicide prevention episodes. We've got some original songs for you, some karaoke, and some poetry, and an interview with Justin Arnwine. So first off, we're going to do the song Tonight I Wanna Cry by Keith Urban. This song just means a lot because I think it really speaks to breaking down your walls and knowing that it's okay to cry. Got water? Alone in this house again tonight. Got the TV on, the sound turned down, and a bottle of wine. There's pictures of you and I on the walls around me, the way that it was and could have been surround me. I'll never get over you by hiding this way. And I've never been the kind to ever let my feelings show. And I thought that being strong and never losing your self-control, but I'm just drunk enough to let go of my pain, to with this pride, let it fall like rain from my eyes. Tonight I wanna cry. Would it help if I turned a sad song on? All by myself would sure hit me hard now that you're gone. Or maybe unfold some old yellow lost love letters. It's gonna hurt bad before it gets better, but I'll never get over you walking away. 'Cause I've never been the kind to ever let my feelings show. And I thought that being strong and never losing your self-control, but I'm just drunk enough to let go of my pain, to hell with this pride, let it fall like rain from my eyes. Tonight I wanna cry. And I've never been the kind to ever let my feelings show. I thought that being strong and never losing your self-control, but I'm just drunk enough to let go of my pain, to with this pride, let it fall like rain from my eyes. Tonight I wanna cry. That was Keith Urban's Tonight I Wanna Cry. So, I hope you guys like that. I can see your comments by looking on the computer here, so if you leave a comment, I'll be able to see it right here. If there's any problems with the stream or anything, let me know. And you can also watch this in HD if you're watching on YouTube right now. So another thing that's just, I mean, there's just been so much in the news. There's been at least about 2 or 3 higher profile suicides that have made the news. You know, there's a lot that don't make the news, but some that have made the news since our last show, so since about a week ago, or in the past 2 weeks that I've seen. And it's just such like a huge issue that is going on. And I really want to focus tonight on like health and wellness and how like if you're unhealthy, it can, you know, add more stress to you than is necessary. And so, singing the second verse of my song, of my song Senseless Tragedies, is focusing, you know, more on the prevention aspect. Because a lot of times I've been talking to people, you know, all this week sharing the show, and a lot of times people feel like they're alone, and they need to know that you're not alone in how you feel, and that it's okay to feel how you're feeling. I mean, if you're depressed, or if you're really sad about something, or if you feel the whole weight of the world on your shoulders, a lot of people feel that same way too. And sometimes it can be helpful to not just go to counseling, but maybe go to support groups. And you can go to support groups from anything from, you know, addiction, or if you had the loss of a child. Or you can also just go to, you know, find like a church group, or just find a group of friends and go out and hang out and have a girls' night and just really relax and take a deep breath, or have a guys' night. And just really take care of yourself and know that you're not alone, and you it's suicides are senseless tragedies, and they're preventable tragedies. And I know sometimes it's depression and illness, but then there was a case of just somebody that this summer that jumped off the a bridge, and the moment he jumped off, he felt regret. He ended up living. It was about 6 feet down the bridge, and he ended up living. And so when they interviewed him, he said the moment that he jumped, he instantly regretted it. And you don't want to ever be in that spot where you think suicide is the only way out and that nobody ever feels the way you do. And then the moment that you take that leap of just trying to end it all, then you regret it. And you want to make sure that you think about how much your life means now, and that it won't always be this way. It won't always be like, there are times in your life when you're happy, and then, you know, just remember those times and know that you can get there again, and that what you're going through is temporary. And not only is the feelings that you're feeling temporary, but you can get through this, and just to try to appreciate the life that you have now. So, you are beautiful, you are easy to love just the way you are. You are worth your life, you deserve it, you can move past your scars. You have big dreams to travel the world and be the best you. Don't let the world steal your soul, because you deserve to see your dreams through. You can soar above in bright and cold hearts. You aren't hard to love, you're perfect as you are. You are a warrior, and you can face this storm. You can get through this even if you're battle worn. Oh, little boy, talk to someone, demand that they hear your cries. Oh, little girl, only you'll define you, you don't have to die. You are such a bright force, burning brighter than they've ever seen. You are the victim of bullies and circumstances, but you're stronger than those who see you as an easy target. Give yourself a second chance. You don't have to take your life. You can continue to shine your light. You can be a testament, so the next people know it's possible and they listen. So no one ever has to lose you or them, or anyone ever again. Rest in peace, senseless tragedies. Rest in peace, senseless tragedies. These are senseless tragedies. If you or somebody you know is suicidal, Call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255 to speak with someone now. If there is an emergency, be sure to dial 911. These are senseless tragedies. Suicides are senseless tragedies. And I know that song was more geared towards, people that are bullied. But even in life, even as an adult, you don't have to be in high school to be bullied. You can especially be bullied now online more than ever. And you can be bullied by coworkers, and you can just be bullied by friends in general. Like, you don't have to be in high school or middle school to be bullied. And to feel, to really have strong feelings and depression and stuff. It doesn't make you less of a person, but you should always seek help if you're feeling that way, or just talk to someone who knows you. And once again, if you or someone you know is feeling suicidal, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. So, as I spoke of last week, the show was really, inspired by my friend Dalton Ofori. So this next song really talks about what it's like for if you commit suicide, or if you've known someone who does, and you've now lost a friend, you've now lost a family member, and they're never coming back, or that person is just never coming back. So, in honor of Dalton Ofori, Only My Memories. I don't even know what to write. Just heard the news today. I heard you took your life. That's not okay. I wish I had been around to help you through like I did before. So when those demons came around, you wouldn't have even opened the door. Would it have made a difference? I don't even know. All I know is the world feels different without your soul. So here I am left with your memories, the good, the bad, the beautiful. You always saw the best in me when I didn't even see it in myself. So here I am left with your picture on my phone in front of me. The memories, the friends I made because of you, while looking at your obituary. And I know you had your flaws, but you were always there for me. Wish I would have given you another call. So I wanna be left with only my memories. Now here I am left with your memories, the good, the bad, the beautiful. You always saw the best in me when I didn't even see it in myself. So here I am left with your pictures on my phone in front of me. The friendships I made because of you, while looking at your obituary. And I know you had your flaws, but you were always good to me. Wish I would have given you another call. So I wanna be left with only my memory. So that was kind of a shortened version of my song. And the person that I was speaking of earlier, who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and then regretted it, I have an article here sent to me by Justin Arnwine. And I just want to read this article to you. This article is from the Desert News. So, in Salt Lake City, the words are simple and profound. I feel lucky to be alive every single day. They are the words of Kevin Hines, who says at age 17, it all came crashing down. He was suffering from paranoia and other mental illness and believed he was a burden to everyone. So he rode a bus to the entry of the Golden Gate Bridge and began to walk toward the center of the span. As he relates the powerful story, a must-watch on YouTube, a tourist stopped him and asked him to take her picture. She then thanked him and walked away. The lie his brain told him at that moment is the same lie that grabs a hold of so many others. It was that moment I just said, nobody cares. He jumped. The millisecond my hands left the rail, it was an instant regret, he says. The Coast Guard pulled him from the San Francisco Bay, broken in so many ways, but alive. Now comes the truth and the message Kevin wants to give to all who will listen. The reality was that everybody cared. I just couldn't see it. He survived his jump, one of the lucky 1% who can claim to have survived the leap from the iconic structure, and he's using his story to build awareness and save the lives of others who are suffering. The past week, the news about suicide was devastating. Can it be a catalyst for solutions, a catalyst for others to seek help? This past week, two well-known individuals, designer Kate Spade and celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, died by suicide. In the days between the first and second death, the Centers for Disease Control issued startling statistics showing dramatic increases in death by suicide since 1999. Utah's rate is among the nation's highest. As Desert News reporter Lois Collins reported, suicide is now the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. The CDC's Vital Signs report released Thursday notes that the rates of most causes of death have been declining. The report is a call to action, and the fact that other rates of death have declined indicates that focus on the tragic problem can bring reversal. Lives actually can be saved. Inside the newsroom this past week, our attention turned again to solutions notable in the story. Everyone has a role in suicide prevention. Here's how you can help, which offers that experts used to say never mention suicide, but now agree that approach was harmful. Ask and be direct. Our editorial was headlined Reach Out to Someone, Do It Today, which discusses, among other things, the positive impact one person can have on another person. It could be the most important solution to this crisis. And then the article continues. I called a dear friend today who lives in California who gets hit by bouts of depression at times. I wanted to see how he was doing to make sure this week's news, though depressing, didn't bring on depression. Thankfully, he was in good spirits, which is great to hear. We spoke openly about Anthony Bourdain, and neither of us were afraid to discuss suicide. When I told him I was actually writing a column about all this, his humor took over. He said, "You should just write half a column and leave it unfinished." Gallows humor is a part of dealing with and overcoming tragedies. A half column would make the point. Suicide is a story unfinished. Kevin Haynes' story of survival and perseverance is just one of many. His voice and the thousands of others who have been in dark places but survived are now the important voices to hear. Recovering happens. I'm living proof, Hines says as he discusses his life. Health officials emphasize the importance of knowing about and using resources. You can help others by letting them know help is available. The responsibility to end this health crisis starts with each of us. The national hotline is 1-800-273-8255. The UNI crisis line is 801-587-3000. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center can be found at their website on www.sprc.org. The National Alliance of Mental Illness is www.nami.org. There are also a bunch of other resources, and I'm going to link them all in the description after this show. So be sure to check them out along with this article and the articles they recommend. So now comes the part of the show for the interview. Today I'm going to be interviewing Justin Arnwine, who actually told me about the story that I just read and just sent me the article. So Justin today is going to be talking about health and wellness in today's society and how your health affects your mental health. So he'll be coming in just a moment. As we wait for Justin, I want to sing another song. Let's go back to my song, Only My Memories. I think it's just a powerful song that's come out of pain, and there are just so many things that are like that. So, here I am, left with your memories, the good, the bad, the beautiful. You always saw the best in me that I didn't even see in myself. I know you had your flaws, but you were always there for me. Wish I would have given you another call, so I wouldn't be left with only my memories. And here is Justin Arnwine. You can have a seat, Justin. Just wanted to make sure the broadcast was still doing well.
I think there's a small delay because when I was watching it, you had literally just started reading the bio.
Oh wow, yeah, there is a bit of a delay when streaming. It's not like actually YouTube seems to be a lot bigger than Facebook's was. Facebook's was only like 10 seconds. But they do have a bit of a delay. I think it's a 30-second delay.
I came in as soon as you said my name.
Yeah.
And then I heard you singing, and I was like, wait, how'd she read so fast?
Yeah, there is a delay, but we're glad you're here now. So, Justin, like I said, is going to talk about health and wellness. Justin is a professional poker player, an independent scholar, artist, and an entrepreneur. He also is the producer and scriptwriter for the Radio 1 show Igniting Change. Justin used to personally train people and is a blue belt in Tang Soo Do. Did I get that right?
No, Tong Soo Do.
Tang Soo Do. Okay. Obviously, I'm not an expert in this stuff. His personal training style focuses on dietary nutrition above all else, followed closely by cardio, strength, and flexibility. He advocates eating whole fruits, steamed vegetables, lean protein, and whole grains. His exercise routine encourages calisthenics, outdoor cardio, and full-body flexibility stretches. Justin advocates his healthy lifestyle concept through personal example and believes everyone can live longer, healthier lives by making diet and exercise top priorities. Justin is also my partner for this YouTube channel and for life. So welcome, Justin. So great to have you here.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here tonight. Long time no see.
Yeah.
So I asked Justin to be on the show tonight because he is so knowledgeable about being healthy and how your everyday life choices affect your mental and physical health in ways you didn't even realize. Of course, Justin is a specialist in the subject, but also he has helped me in my journey from homelessness and all the unhealthy habits that come with that to stable and healthy person and mindset. For example, Justin early on explained to me the connection between your mood and how you treat your body. We all laugh at the hangry Snickers commercial, but that kind of thing is true, isn't it, Justin? How does how we treat our body affect our mood?
In very subtle ways that add up into affecting important decisions. If you don't get a lot of sleep one day, but you normally get the appropriate amount of sleep, that's fine. But it's very easy to kind of fall into what I consider the trap, where you stay up late, so then you sleep less. It's like if you go to bed at 3:00 in the morning one day, and then you wake up at 9, so you only got 6 hours instead of your normal 7 to 8 hours. No big deal.
Right.
If you continuously push it and push it and push it, eventually 3 a.m. will turn into 5 a.m. And if you're going to bed at 5 a.m. and waking up at 9 a.m., then that can, and then you have to make an important decision and you blow it and you're like, oh, why? I don't understand. What on earth made me say that or do that? Or, that's why.
So, as we discussed last week while I was interviewing Barbara, we live in a culture that praises unhealthy lifestyles, just like the ones you were describing. We treat sleep and food as just an inconvenience that impedes our progress and lifestyle. This can be especially true when you have non-traditional jobs, such as being a stripper, a YouTuber, an entrepreneur, an Olympic athlete, or a professional poker player. Most of the time, these jobs have no unions and really throws norms out the window. And it's not just that these jobs aren't 9 to 5. The demand of these types of professions to be married to it and thrive on very little sleep or breaks also characterize them. Sure, they provide more freedom, but they take tolls in other ways. What is it like being a professional poker player? And have you ever struggled to balance work and health?
Yes. Yes. It can be very freeing to be your own boss, to work when you want, answer to nobody, but that can present its own problems when you get to the point where you're doing something that is unhealthy, but everyone's praising you for it. No one gets a pat on the back for getting 8 hours of sleep, 8 weeks in a row.
That's true.
No one says like, good job, man. Like,
you don't get a sleeping trouble.
Yeah, it's you and I have had this conversation in the past. There is no congratulations, you prevented a tragedy from ever occurring award.
Yeah.
You know, everyone loves the person who swoops in and saves the day, but
Right.
you know, the person, for every person who swooped in to save the day, there's another person you've never heard of who prevented a tragedy from ever occurring,
Yes.
and there's no recognition, there's no. So for poker specifically, I mean, there were times in my life where it wasn't even, I wouldn't have considered it anything special to have. I mean, for weeks, months, day after day, week after week, month after month, to average 91 hours. I mean, I must have, because I used to maintain a 5,000 hour a year status at the casino. So I was somehow. It's, now it seems unbelievable, but I mean, back then, the way I was doing it is because I thought it was completely normal. Like, I was averaging 91 hours a week. The dealers would show up and laugh and go, "How long have you been playing?" And I would say, like, 38 hours. And they'd be like, "Oh, just getting started?" As a joke.
Right.
You know,
And
like,
that's and just to put that in perspective, for full time workers, they usually work only 2,087 hours per year. That's according to the U.S. Office of Personnel
yeah,
Management, and you were averaging 5,000.
2,800 sounds completely normal. And
Not even 2,800, 2,087.
oh,
So you were
2087,
more
and I
than
was doing
twice
5,000.
more than.
As I had friends who were winning, if if not as much as I was, more, and they were having 5 hour sessions. Their longest session ever would have been like 20 something hours. You know, like they were doing just fine financially. You know, never had the red eyes that I used to have when we first met, and no one was ever giving them praises. But it was, I remember the first time it was a guy I know named Matt. I remember he won like $5,000 in a 2-5 game, which is 1,000 big blinds. For to put that in perspective, if you win 300 big blinds, that's considered a very successful session. So 1,000 is, I mean,
Wow, that's
yeah, he really
very
crushed it.
impressive.
And I left and I ran into him a couple of days later, and I said, "Oh, so how much longer did you play after I left?" He was like, "Oh man, that session was like, I think 6 hours." And I was like, "Whoa, like." Why did you? I was like, why did you? And me not being able to even comprehend. Uh, I was, what I actually asked him was, why did you leave?
Yeah.
Like, because that was where my mind was at the time. I said, well, why did you leave? And he responded in a way that I've never forgotten. And he said, Justin, what's your longest session? And at the time it was, um, at that time it was 121 hours. And I said, I don't 100. He said, you played 5 days straight. I said, yeah. He said, wow. He said, that's insane. He said, I've never played more than 26 hours. And I said, yeah, I do that all the time. He said, you must never ever leave at your peak. And he wasn't. It's weird because he wasn't saying it sarcastically or as like a way to throw shade, but he was dead on. Like when he said that, it hit me. I said, "Wow, he's right." Like if I really track back on, no matter how much I've ever won, I've never left when I was winning the most. No matter how much I've won, I can always say at some point I had more. You know, and then that's really everyone. For all the pats on the back, there would be one or two people who would always say, keep it real and say, I don't think that sleep deprivation you're putting yourself through is healthy. They would say, good thing you're young. You know, they would, those kind of things. And you always kind of looked at those people and you kind of just shook it off. It didn't feel like hate, but it didn't make sense what they were saying. And, now I understand, like, they were trying to help.
So what was your turning point?
Really, once we started dating, and I had been so far removed from being homeless by the time we got together. I hadn't been homeless. I hadn't been like homeless in any way relevant, since like 20 for about 2 years at least. in any capacity whatsoever. So I mean, 2 years, it doesn't sound like a long time, but as you know, that's a long time to be removed.
Yeah.
So I was telling you, you know, what to do from personal experience, and then at the same time realizing how many of these things that I often ignored.
Mm.
And then back then I didn't used to keep records, but I was matching the times when I was inconsistent with the advice I was giving you with negative results. And
Mm.
even though I wasn't keeping perfect records, like, it was enough correlation that was difficult to be coincidence.
Mm.
It was, and that's when I started to realize, like, oh, like, um unhealthy habits, bad decisions, they go hand in hand.
Mm. And then I know, especially tournaments for poker players can especially put a lot of stress because they have like only 15-minute breaks. If you get a break during the tournament, depending on how late it starts, you might not even get a dinner break. And then they have you go from whatever time you get there, sometimes to like 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And then you have to come back the next day. And I know we're talking about like those non-traditional jobs, but even with traditional jobs, as we were talking about today on our walks, such as being a server, a lawyer, a doctor, working in civil rights like your mom, you can feel intense pressure to be unhealthy. And college students especially face this all the time as well. From an even broader perspective, men specifically face pressure to be providers and to do whatever it takes to provide. Although women face this too, as Barbara pointed out last week, men face the pressure more intensely because they are expected to provide and protect. This is the system of patriarchy and sexism that negatively affects men. Justin, how does patriarchy and sexism affect men's health? Is it harder for men to stay healthy, and do you agree with my statements?
Uh, it it's like, okay, so I guess how to explain a tournament to someone. A cash game is kind of like a like work. You if you play poker, you may show up at 3 in the morning, but you're if you show up at 3 in the morning, you play till 11 a.m., or you play until whoever is bringing the action in the game leaves, or the table breaks, or whatever your structure is. It's still, you showed up and then you left, and then you bought in for a certain amount and you cashed out for a certain amount, and you can see exactly, how much you're making,
Yeah.
what your hourly is. There will be outliers. There will be times when you have 1,000 big blind winning sessions, but on average, if you keep records for about 6 months, you'll start to see, that you average $30 or $40, or how, and then whatever stakes you're playing, however many big blinds that is. So it no matter how there's more room for error in cash games. I'll put it like that, because
Yeah.
that day that you slept 4 hours, if over the course of 6 months, it's like, okay, maybe that day you blew it and lost $1,000, but there'll be plenty of nights where you showed up fresh and then did well.
Right.
So it'll even out
Yes.
enough that you can account for it. Tournaments are a completely different animal. It's like, it's the difference between, showing up to work and completing your task and then walking away. That would be a cash game. And
Yeah.
tournaments would be like doing a big presentation and with a bunch of other staff members that has to be due at a certain time and has to be completed to the T. And that, because tournaments are kind of a high pressure situation, and everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
it's not like, in a cash game, when you choose to play 20 hours, you put that pressure on yourself.
That's, yeah.
Like, you could have left after 8 hours. You definitely could have left after 12. Right? I mean, because no matter who you are, I mean, even when I was playing those 80-hour sessions, after 12 hours, I would start yawning at the table, and,
Right.
I would see other people go to drink. I didn't drink coffee. I was kind of insane back then. I would just keep it going. But I had years and years of being athletic, running cross country, and to the point that when I was to then have a sedentary profession, it seemed, it was very, very easy at that point in my life. I mean, after being so active for almost my entire life to then finally have a moment to like sit down. It was
Right.
I didn't realize how much energy I had in reserves, but
Gotcha.
that's pretty much gone now. However, in tournaments, you don't get the benefit no matter how much energy you have in reserves, no matter how physically fit you are. It doesn't matter. You have to show up at 12. You have to play till like 3 in the morning, and then you might have to come back the next day at noon.
Right.
And you don't get to complain because someone else is doing that same thing. Only difference is they've flown from another time zone to play in a tournament.
Right.
You know, so they're doing everything you're doing while suffering from jet lag.
We often see Daniel Negreanu, who's a high-profile professional poker player. He usually has to fly into a tournament that he's playing that same day.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the person already there, like if they start whining about it, it's like he'll be like, "Hey guys, like just got here and had to
Right.
adjust to X and Y time." And I ran into people who had just came back from Vegas. Remember when I started the tournament series here in Maryland? I had recently came
Yeah.
from, with jet lag. And the difference is when you're a guy, I think there's a lot less incentive to complain.
Mm.
I think logistically it's much harder to be a woman if everything were fair and square.
Yeah.
If you weren't factoring in all these factors that can't be ignored.
I'm sorry, continue.
I mean, there in the real world you can't ignore certain factors, but if somehow, some way you could go to utopia and there was no racism and there was no sexism, then logistically it would still be more difficult to be a woman because women's health, issues are there's just most of the career paths are male dominated, so women's health is kind of like an afterthought.
Mm.
Maternity leave is always kind of I I I don't want to say always, but it's kind of seen as like a somewhat of a burden to the company, whereas like paternity leave is like, oh cool, like you're a dad, like there's a whole social connotation that makes it more difficult on just the pure empirical side, of being a woman. Nevertheless, depending on how male dominated your workplace is, what your race is, and how many people look like you, and there's all these other elements. But having said that, if you happen to be a guy who is struggling with the pressure, then you are in a class of your own, because in reality you're not, whatever, you're not like some crazy outlier. There's a significant amount of people who are male and successful who are dealing with the same issues you are. They're just keeping it to themselves. It's just those people may have more resources than you do, and and others helping them along the way. So but you may not have access to the same resources they have. So you might have to. It might be more. But because no one else is complaining, no one else is saying anything, no one else is. It's almost like being in a tournament. It's like, how can you complain about, the fact that you had to play from noon to 3 and then wake up the next day and play at noon again when everyone else is seemingly doing the same thing with ease.
Right, and then there's definitely a stigma on counseling, as Barbara talked about last week, but I think for men there's even more of a stigma, right, if a man wants to go to counseling.
Right, I mean, because think about it. If you were a single mom and you were struggling to balance work and motherhood and friendships and relationships, and you just needed someone to talk to, I feel like the majority of your friends, whether they're male or female, would understand and encourage you to talk to someone.
Yes.
Whereas if you were a single dad and you were experiencing these same things, like I think a lot of your friends rather they may say it in a lighthearted way, but the meaning would be implied as insensitive as the statement would sound, and would just kind of look at you and be like, "Man up."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I doubt. I'm sure that every now and again, like like a woman encounters that the equivalent phrase, but I doubt from the people she's closest to. Maybe some
Yeah.
bystander saying like, "Oh, my mother did that." You know, like you stop making excuses. But I
Right.
doubt like her closest friends would be so insensitive. Whereas a guy, it's completely standard for if you were at if you were watching the game and during commercial you let on that raising little Sam and balancing work with trying to move on from your past relationship was really um uh pulling you down. I can't see the other guys putting down the chips, pausing the TV and going, well, tell me more, that.
That's true. Yeah, and that brings up a point about like custody cases for men. I know a lot of men feel like they can't bring, women to court, and I know that also affects men when they have a child that they can't see, right? I mean, it affects them being a single father, but it probably also affects them when they have a child they can't see for whatever reason or don't get a lot of time with.
Yeah, I think I think it would be I think it and I'm not sure how much more difficult it becomes along the way, because I know I have some friends who don't get to see their I have a friend specifically who doesn't get to see his son very often, but he gets to see him he gets to see him. We've added it up, and it's about if from his mind state he thinks he gets to see his son whenever he wants.
Right.
But remember when we were casually speaking and did the
Yes.
math on it,
Yeah.
in reality he sees his son about as often as you get to see your daughter, and
Right.
you would love to see your daughter way more often, and you always feel like it's never enough.
Right.
And when we did the math on it, we realized that he sometimes less. Sometimes you spend on if you just did it empirically, how many hours, do you
Yeah.
get to spend in real time? Remember, we realized he was
Yes.
spending less time. But
Yes.
and so I think at the moment, because he's so career oriented and one of those very driven, purposeful people, he doesn't see it in reality. But I feel like if he was coming home and all of a sudden, like the basketball was on the table and a baseball glove was on, and he was like, "Well, when did that happen?"
Right.
That's the type of I think that wouldn't be so. I'm not sure he would be so even killed. I'm not sure he will be so even killed if the arrangement doesn't change
Mm-hmm.
and he has to experience something like that, because a 1 to 5 year old isn't making those kind of drastic changes overnight.
Right.
Whereas, like once you start entering into preteen and teen, it's like one day your favorite singer has switched.
Right.
You're not into that kind of music. One day you don't dress the same. One
Right.
day, and as a child, you're not realizing how drastic these changes appear to your parents.
Right.
So just imagine it. And I'm speaking from a perspective of someone whose parent could see the development in real time.
Right.
So imagine missing that, and then all of a sudden it's, oh no, I don't do this now, I do that.
Yeah, I know. I've spoken to quite a few of my friends that are men and that don't get to see their kid, and would like to, and just the pressure it puts on them and the depression of kids, and they're feeling really depressed because their kids are getting older.
And it can manifest in different ways. Like the person who I'm telling you about, I mean, if you could time travel 10 years ago, he and I played about in 2008. You wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between how we were both relentless in our pursuit to play poker, and it might have been a year, 2 years ago. We were talking, and I remember, and he's like 5 years younger than I am, and I remember him saying, "Yeah, Justin, I think it's too late." He was talking about playing full time. He was like, I think it's just too late for that.
Mm.
And by then he had had a son, and he didn't blame his kid. He didn't, because you don't. One, I don't think he felt that way consciously, at least, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't feel comfortable enough telling it to me. But he didn't blame circumstances in any way. But he did say, that was the first time I ever heard him say, he said, "I think it's too late for that."
Mm.
I was telling him about how I had played full time and how the game had kind of evolved, and he said, "Yeah, I think it's too late for me. I think it's too late for that." And that was, and I'm sure that was a manifestation of him just being like, because what else has changed? If the desire is still there, then he's talking about life circumstances.
Right.
And I mean, having graduated, he was in college back then. Now he's graduated. We used to be struggling with a few $100s. Now he has a nice 5 figure salary. Now 6 figures, and it's like, on the surface, it's like you make so much more money. You have so much more resources. Why on earth would it be too late now?
Right.
So what's the one thing in his life I mean, all of these are on the surface improvements. So what's the one thing? He didn't say it, but I mean, you do the math. What's the one thing there that's different?
Right.
Right.
And postpartum, I mean, depression is a manifestation of, depression can be like an apathy towards things you once enjoyed.
Right.
And I mean, I think people need to really watch that. When somebody used to love doing something or love eating something or love going somewhere, and all of a sudden they withdraw back. It's, that's one of the warning signs to look for, that, someone might be feeling depressed. Or I know there's a YouTuber that is all of a sudden posting a lot more depressing things, or things with undertones of depression, and that's just like things to watch. So what are your recommendations for people to stay healthy in today's society full of pressures and unhealthy lifestyles?
So for sure, there's definitely a period in your life where, if you're if you're if you're if you're trying to pursue excellence, it's not going to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
There is, you know, no actual. I mean, there have been plenty of studies, and without going into debating number of hours, there's a significant amount of time you have to dedicate to your craft in order to reach excellence. And you and I have talked about this all the time. The most important factor is that, like, once you get to the level everyone else is, where they would be satisfied, you have to be unsatisfied to achieve higher.
Right.
So that's going to definitely lead to some trouble. I mean, you and I were just watching the national gymnastics finals, and
Right.
where Simone Biles dominated,
Yes.
in a I mean, it was just a dominating performance, and they asked her, grade yourself. If you said Rio was an A+, what do you think you were today? And she said, I was a B.
And she got a 6 point, I believe, like about 6 points higher than everybody else there.
Yeah, it's not like she was competing, like the former world champion was there. The former national champion from the year she didn't compete was there.
Yeah.
The competition was good.
Right.
And she just thoroughly dominated and was like, yeah, I'm a B. So what's the chances she's gonna go reward herself with some cake and ice cream and relax, right? Like, if she did all the work she had to put in, dominated the competition, and still felt like, there's still miles to walk. So anybody who's achieving that the level, I mean, the YouTuber, without putting his name out there, the YouTuber we're talking about was on a trip with a bunch of other YouTubers, other professionals. Yes. And he was literally the only person putting out content while they were still traveling.
And all of the YouTubers have been putting up content, about at least 5 days a week for, minimum a year.
Right, and all the other people,
Yes.
but during this trip, the rest of them just basically said it's impossible.
Right, exactly.
It's impossible to produce content while on the road, while meeting our other obligation.
Yes.
And somehow, some way, he was meeting the demands, almost never missing a video. But you can see that the only way he was able to do that is even in performing such an incredible feat. You notice that he was still like, sorry guys, the videos aren't as up to par. Like he's accomplishing this incredible feat while still holding himself to the fire and still saying like, I know, still saying like, still worrying about things like editing content. I mean, like editing quality
but pushing himself so hard has actually had negative effects on his mental health, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, because there's always going to be a setback. You can't. I'm sure that the reason why you caught me in the room taking a nap today, when we take a pretty balanced approach when it's 90 something degrees outside and just go on walks. I mean, if you had rewinded 5 years ago, I could have walked for another, no exaggeration, like 5 hours, and would have came home and been doing 3 different things at the same time. But doing that over and over and over and over again has taken a toll to the point that now when we go on our hour-long walk and we come home, I'm taking a nap. I mean, so eventually it does catch up to you, and you have to balance. It's very difficult in the moment. It's no way I could go back to myself 4 years ago and say, hey, here's what you should be doing. There's just no way. But what you have to, it's important that once you do achieve the level of excellence that you've been pursuing and you've been sacrificing for,
and while trying to achieve it.
Yeah, but especially afterwards, because it's good to dominate nationals and think that your performance is a B. That way you're still really geared up to do good at Worlds, and then you're really geared up to do good in the Olympics.
Right.
But at a certain point, you have to realize that at Rio you were an A+. You have to have some achievable standard that you're not, so that it's not just constant. I'm constantly getting 4 hours of sleep. I'm constantly playing 91 hours a week. And I'm just going to do that forever until I burn out, because you will eventually burn out. You have to have something attainable that you're working for. And then once you reach it, you have to then say, okay, now let me focus on all these things I've been sacrificing. You don't want to get into the habit of, I've sacrificed living well. I've sacrificed my personal wellness for so long that now you just think that's norm.
Right.
You just think eating 1 meal a day is normal. Right. You just think that, drinking one of those little 8 ounces of water is sufficient hydration. Right. You don't want to get into the point where you're like, fruit, what's fruit? Right? I mean, like, if you're doing all that for a specific event, a tournament, or the life equivalent of a tournament, okay, we understand why you're doing that, but if you get to the point where you're in a cash game or the life equivalent of a cash game and you still to be on, high pressure mode, right? It's like, okay, like you really shouldn't need a Red Bull, just to drive home safely after going to work, getting there on time and leaving when you're supposed to. Like, you should not be like, man, like, I'm gonna need a Red Bull or I'm just gonna crash. Like that's, I mean, that if you're making that joke often, then that's bad.
Right. So how can people? What are your recommendations for people staying healthy? Like, what should they eat? What should they do? Should they set goals for themselves? Or
some people are big goal setters. You mentioned Daniel. He loves to set goals. Yeah. I think, and I really dislike doing this, but I just had to. Is keeping records. I'm sure there's plenty of apps you can use. I see my friends using apps all the time. you use an app to document your work hours.
Yeah.
But I personally just go old school, pen and paper. This I write like I guess you I put person session one,
Mm-hmm.
7 hours, result. For me it's directly correlated in money. But so
And
for other people
yeah.
it would be, if you were a writer you would say, I guess if you were writing like your if you were writing and you were trying to the easiest, what I would say is, okay, I want to have 60 pages done in the next 2 months.
Right.
So on average I need to do a page a day. And that doesn't mean that every single day you hold yourself. I mean, what I would recommend is that you're not trying to write the greatest page ever every single day.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is that you set a time period, rather it be somewhere between 1 and 5 hours, and during that time you just write, or you stare at a blank keyboard. But that's the time that you devote to writing. Whatever it is. Rather for some people it'll be early in the morning. 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then they'll go about their day. For other people it's late. It's 10 p.m. to midnight.
Right.
But whatever it is, like you set that time period, and I would keep a record, and you would say, 2 hours, like 0 pages. 2 hours, 1 page. 2 hours, 0 pages. 2 hours, 4 pages.
And our bodies really respond well to schedules too. Like if you schedule like time to eat, have a certain time that you meet breakfast or lunch and dinner.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's a lot easier if you already know, like, I mean, no matter what, I'm gonna spend 2 hours in front of this keyboard, or no matter what, I'm going to play at least. I'm gonna go to the casino at least 20 hours this week, or no matter what, I'm going to spend XYZ on trying to improve at, or trying to achieve whatever it is you're looking forward to. That way you don't become um um harmfully imbalanced.
Yeah,
You
and you
know,
can look at how many hours a day you're spending and
because you're not trying to build Rome from the ground up in one day.
yeah.
Like you're only, no matter what you do, for the rest of the time period, that today you're only going to be spending somewhere, so you're not trying to win away if you one of those sessions, trying to come up with in a flash of genius. That way, if you come up with, you know, just a couple more steps, it's great. That's
Right.
what that would be my recommendation. That whatever your normal, whatever is normal for you, you should try to fit what you're trying to. You should try to fit that added that added pressure into the normal, instead of being like the normal has to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice the normal in order
Mm.
to, because that's how like that's how getting 6 hours of sleep turns into getting 4 hours of sleep. And
Right.
whereas if you've already decided, like, I don't know, my bedtime's not changing,
Right. Yeah.
then you don't experience that.
And how can people get in contact with you?
um you can, however they contact you would work, is but also my Facebook is public, Justin Arnwine. My Twitter, at Arnwine Justin. um I have another Twitter, an older Twitter, Mother Grizzle, MOTHAGRIZZLE. Gmail, JUSTINEE04 @gmail.com. And those are the ones that I check frequent.
All
Or
right.
comments on,
Comments
these
on this live
videos.
stream. Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the show and offering your insight. It was really great to have you. Do you have any last word?
Yes. If you have to make one small change, eat breakfast every day.
Mm.
That's the one small change, like that will start you in the right direction. I was thinking about when Daniel told people go on a walk if you can't lift weights. Like the
Right.
one small change, if all this other stuff sounds insane, like just, you know what? Make it a mission to eat breakfast every single
Mm.
day and then go from there.
So, eat breakfast every day. Most important meal of the day. So, thank you for being on.
All right.
So, we ran a little bit late, but that's because I started a little bit late. We were having technical issues getting the stream running. And so, but thank you guys for joining. There might be a part 3 next week, so watch my social media profiles and the Botsy social media profiles to see if there will be a part 3. But of course, we'll be back next week at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for another one live on YouTube. So thank you guys for joining. And once again, if you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Again, that number is 1-800-273-8255. They're available 24 hours a day and even on an online chat system. So thank you guys for joining me. Thanks for joining me last week. Thank you for all the views, all the love on that show. And